You are listening to Fate in the Cosmos by Elton Thomas, Part 3, Chapters 11 through 15. Chapter 11. Fate Analysis. Lonni sat at her station aboard the Watcher, her reflective eyes fixed on the streams of data that flickered across her screen. Her mind, usually calm and focused, was now a whirlwind of calculations, probabilities, and the undeniable reality of what she had witnessed. Stacy and John's synchronized actions had defied everything she knew about the universe. The odds had been astronomical, far beyond the realm of coincidence. Lonni recalculated once again, her fingers moving effortlessly across the interface. The new probability flashed on the screen, 1 in 9.85 trillion. For a moment, Lonni simply stared at the number. The sheer improbability of it settled over her like a weight. This was impossible. It couldn't have happened by chance. And yet, it had. The data was irrefutable. Impossible, she thought again, her mind still grappling with the enormity of what this meant. But it happened. Her mind reached out telepathically, connecting with the crew who had been monitoring the situation. Eris, Mira, Voron, and Kala all responded in unison, their thoughts linking with Lonnie's in a collective network of understanding. "I've recalculated the probability," Lonni projected, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It's 1 in 9.85 trillion that this could have occurred naturally." A ripple of shock passed through the group. "That's beyond improbable," Voron replied, his telepathic voice steady, but there was an undercurrent of unease. "It's impossible." "Yes," Lonni agreed. "There's no logical explanation for what we've observed. This defies everything we understand about probability, about the universe." Eris leaned forward in his seat, his expression calm but focused. "If the data is correct, and I have no reason to doubt it, then we have to consider that something else is at play here. Something we haven't accounted for." "Fate," Kala whispered, the word lingering in the telepathic link between them. "Is this what humans call fate?" Mira's voice was measured, though there was a note of curiosity in her tone. "If we are to entertain the concept of fate, we must approach it with the same rigor as any other scientific inquiry. We need to gather more data, analyze it, and establish criteria for understanding this phenomenon." "Agreed," Lonni said, her mind already shifting into planning mode. "We have enough evidence now to move forward with a formal analysis of fate. It's clear that this goes beyond coincidence." The crew fell silent, their thoughts synchronizing as they considered the implications of this decision. They had come to Earth expecting an interesting, if underwhelming, study of human behavior. But now they were faced with something far greater, an anomaly that defied the very fabric of logic and probability. "Let's move forward with a full analysis," Lonni projected, her voice firm with resolve. "We need to establish criteria, set roles, and plan the study carefully. This isn't something we can rush." The group nodded in unison, their collective thoughts aligning. Lonni could sense the seriousness of the moment. This wasn't just another study. This was a leap into the unknown, a challenge to everything they had believed about the universe. "Eris, you'll oversee the data collection," Lonni instructed, her mind already mapping out the roles. "We need real-time tracking of Stacy and John, as well as an ongoing analysis of their actions, thoughts, and behaviors. Voron, you'll handle the technical side. Ensure that our systems are equipped to handle any anomalies we encounter. We can't afford to miss anything." Eris and Voron nodded, their thoughts clear and focused. Lonni turned to Mira. "Mira, your role will be to continue studying the biological and psychological aspects of this. We need to understand how these emotions, hope, longing, belief, are influencing their behavior. It's possible that this is tied to more than just external factors." Mira's eyes flickered with understanding. "I'll begin a deeper analysis of their emotional patterns." Finally, Lonni addressed Kala. "Kala, I want you to explore the cultural and philosophical aspects of fate. Humans have been discussing fate for centuries. We need to understand how they perceive it, and if that perception is influencing their reality." "Understood," Kala replied, her voice calm but curious. "I'll begin with an analysis of their historical and cultural references to fate." With the roles established, The crew fell into quiet contemplation. Lonni could sense the gravity of their decision. This wasn't just a study anymore. It was an exploration of something beyond their understanding, something that could change everything they knew about the universe. Far below, in the city of St. Louis, John and Stacy were also feeling the weight of something they couldn't explain. Since their synchronized actions at the trolley and Metrolink, both had felt a new energy, a sense of purpose that neither could fully understand. John stood in his apartment, staring out at the city lights. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and confusion. He had never believed in fate, never put stock in the idea that some cosmic force could dictate his life. And yet, here he was, unable to shake the feeling that he had to find her. The woman from the train, the one who had returned his keys. "Who are you?" he thought, his mind racing. "And why can't I stop thinking about you?" In her studio, Stacy felt the same pull. She had tried to bury herself in her work, to lose herself in the colors and textures of her paintings, but nothing could distract her from the overwhelming desire to find him. The man from the Metrolink, the stranger who had tossed her phone back to her in that brief, impossible moment. She stood before her canvas, her hands trembling as she stared at the blank space in front of her. Her heart ached with something she couldn't put into words, a longing, a need to understand what had happened between them. It wasn't rational, it didn't make sense, but she couldn't ignore it. "I have to find him," she thought, her mind racing. "Somehow, some way, I have to find him." Both John and Stacy were driven by a new energy, a quiet determination that pushed them forward, even though they didn't know each other's names or where to begin. But they knew one thing for certain. They couldn't let this go. Fate, or whatever it was, had brought them together once. It would bring them together again. Back aboard the Watcher, Lonni monitored their thoughts with growing fascination. John and Stacy, despite their logical resistance, had fully embraced the idea that they were meant to find each other. It was as if their very souls were pulling them together, defying the odds, defying logic. "It's happening again," Lonni thought, her mind buzzing with anticipation. They're committing to finding each other. The crew sensed it too. There was a subtle shift in the air, a sense that they were on the cusp of something monumental. This was more than just a study now. This was the beginning of something far greater than they had ever anticipated. "We need to be ready," Lonni projected to the crew. "Fate, or whatever this is in motion, and we're about to witness something extraordinary." As the dwellers prepared for the next phase of their analysis, John and Stacy, miles apart, felt the same pull. It was only a matter of time now. Their paths would cross again, and when they did, the universe would never be the same. Chapter 12. Stacy Analysis. The Watcher drifted silently through space, its presence undetectable to the world below. Inside, the crew worked with unwavering focus, their attention now fully turned to Stacy Sims. The decision had been made to conduct a deep analysis of her, an examination not just of her life on the surface, but of everything that made her who she was. Her history, her family, her genetics, her culture, and even her dreams were now subject to the dwellers' scrutiny. Lonni sat at her station, the glow of the data streams reflecting off her reflective skin. Stacy had been an intriguing subject from the beginning, her introverted nature masking a depth of emotion and creativity that fascinated the dwellers. But now, as the crew delved deeper into her life, they were uncovering layers of complexity that went far beyond what they had expected. "Begin full genetic analysis," Lonni projected to Mira, who was responsible for studying biological and psychological aspects. Mira's eyes flickered as she pulled up Stacy's genetic profile, the streams of data unfolding in front of her. "Her genetic makeup is unremarkable by our standards," Mira projected, her telepathic voice calm. "But there are some anomalies in her neural patterns, an enhanced sensitivity to certain stimuli. It's subtle, but it might explain her heightened intuition." "Heightened intuition?" Eris interjected from his station. "That could be important. Humans often describe this as a sixth sense, but it's rarely measurable." "It's more than intuition," Mira continued. Her brain shows elevated activity in areas associated with perception and awareness, particularly during REM sleep. It's possible that Stacy's subconscious mind is more attuned to external stimuli than we initially thought. Lonni nodded, filing away the information. What about her cultural influences? Kala, have you found anything unusual in her background? Kala's mind hummed with curiosity as she scrolled through Stacy's family history and cultural context. Stacy comes from a long line of individuals with creative tendencies: painters, sculptors, and musicians. Her family's culture has always placed a strong emphasis on self-expression, particularly through art. This could explain why Stacy's artistic abilities are so deeply intertwined with her identity. Her art is not just a skill, it's a part of her emotional core. Lonni considered this for a moment. So, her emotional state is directly connected to her creativity. It's possible that her heightened perception is a byproduct of that connection. The crew continued their analysis, examining every aspect of Stacy's life. They looked at her family dynamics, the way she had grown up in a household that encouraged creativity but also placed pressure on her to succeed. They studied her relationships, or lack thereof, her introverted nature keeping her at a distance from most people. Yet despite this, Stacy had developed a deep emotional intelligence, her sensitivity to the world around her far more acute than the average human. But it was the analysis of her dreams that intrigued them the most. Mira, can you access her dream patterns? Lonni asked, her curiosity piqued. Mira nodded, her mind syncing with the data streams that monitored Stacy's subconscious. Her dreams are vivid, rich with symbolism and emotion. She often dreams about her art, but lately, there's been a recurring presence in her dreams. A figure, always distant, always just out of reach. She doesn't know who it is, but there's a sense of longing, a desire to find them. Lonnie's thoughts sharpened. Could it be connected to John? It's possible, Mira replied. Her subconscious is processing the events of their encounters, even if she's not fully aware of it. The figure in her dreams could be a representation of her longing to reconnect with him. As the crew continued to analyze Stacy's dreams, something strange began to happen. Stacy was starting to feel them. In her studio, Stacy stood in front of her easel, her brush moving absently across the canvas. The colors swirled together, deep blues and vibrant oranges, capturing the essence of a Missouri sunset. But her mind was elsewhere. For days now, she had felt a strange presence, as if someone, or something, was watching her. At first, she had dismissed it as a figment of her imagination. She was an artist after all, prone to moments of vivid thought and emotion. But the feeling hadn't gone away. It lingered, always at the edge of her awareness, like an invisible shadow following her every move. She paused, her hand stilling as she glanced over her shoulder. The studio was empty, as it always was, the soft light from the windows casting long shadows across the floor. But the feeling remained. Is someone there? She thought, her pulse quickening. She shook her head, trying to push the thought aside. It was ridiculous. There was no one here. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling. Later that day, Stacy sat with a friend at a small cafe in the Grove. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes distant as her mind wandered back to the strange sensation that had been haunting her. You okay? Her friend asked, noticing the distraction in Stacy's expression. Stacy hesitated, unsure of how to explain what she had been feeling. I don't know. Lately, I felt like someone's watching me. Her friend raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Watching you? Like a secret admirer? Stacy shook her head, her voice low. No, not like that. It's different. I don't know how to explain it. It's like there's someone, something, just out of sight. I can't see them, but I can feel them. Her friend's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. That sounds unsettling. Maybe it's just stress? You've got a lot going on with your art show coming up. Stacy nodded, though she wasn't convinced. Yeah, maybe. It's probably nothing. But deep down, she knew it wasn't nothing. There was something there, something she couldn't explain. Back aboard the Watcher, the crew was abuzz with curiosity. "She's sensing us," Lonni projected, her mind racing with possibilities. "How is that possible? We're undetectable to human technology, and yet, she can feel our presence." Eris leaned forward in his seat, his thoughts sharp with focus. "It could be linked to the heightened perception we identified earlier. Her brain is more attuned to external stimuli than most humans. It's possible she's picking up on our presence in some way we haven't accounted for." "But we've never encountered this before," Kala added, her voice tinged with fascination. "No other subject has sensed us like this. What makes Stacy different?" Mira's mind buzzed with thought. It could be a combination of factors: her genetic sensitivity, her emotional intelligence, her dreams. All of these elements could be working together to make her more aware of what's happening around her, even if she doesn't consciously understand it. "This only deepens the mystery," Lonni said, her mind alive with questions. "If she can sense us, even on a subconscious level, it suggests that there are aspects of human perception we haven't fully explored. We need to continue the analysis. Push deeper, understand more." The crew nodded in agreement, their curiosity intensifying. What had started as a simple study of human behavior had now evolved into something far more profound. Stacy was becoming more than just a subject. She was a key to understanding the deeper mysteries of human perception, and perhaps even fate itself. As the days passed, Stacy's sense of being watched grew stronger. She found herself glancing over her shoulder more often, her heart racing at the slightest sound. The feeling wasn't menacing, but it was unsettling, like a presence just beyond the veil of reality, watching, waiting. She couldn't explain it, and no one seemed to understand. But Stacy knew, deep in her soul, that something was there, and it wasn't going away. Chapter 13. John Analysis. The Watcher floated in its steady orbit, silent and imperceptible to the planet below. Inside, the crew's focus had shifted. After their intense study of Stacy Sims, they had uncovered something unexpected: Stacy's heightened perception, her ability to sense their presence despite the undetectable nature of their technology. Now, it was time to turn their attention to John Colt. Lonni sat at her station, her mind humming with anticipation. They had already begun their analysis of John, but now the focus had sharpened. There was something connecting John and Stacy that went beyond coincidence, something deeper that had become impossible to ignore. The crew had sensed it in Stacy's dreams, in her emotional reactions, and now it seemed that John too was caught in the same mysterious web. "Begin genetic analysis," Lonni projected to Mira, who was once again tasked with studying the biological aspects of their subject. Mira's fingers moved gracefully over the interface, streams of data flowing before her as she accessed John's genetic profile. "John's genetic makeup is standard for his population," Mira reported, her voice calm. "But like Stacy, there are subtle anomalies in his neural activity. His brain is showing heightened activity in the areas associated with problem-solving and logic, but there's also elevated activity in regions tied to emotional response. It's a curious mix." Lonni nodded, her thoughts focused. "And his dreams? What have we found there?" Mira accessed the data from John's recent sleep patterns, her eyes narrowing as she studied the information. "His dreams are remarkably similar to Stacy's. He's been experiencing recurring dreams of a figure, distant, unknown, but always present. The emotions associated with the dream are intense, filled with longing and curiosity. He's searching for something, just as Stacy is." Lonnie's gaze sharpened. Could it be that they're dreaming about each other? "It's possible," Mira replied, her voice tinged with curiosity. "The parallels between their dreams are undeniable. Both are experiencing a sense of incompleteness, of needing to find something, or someone, that's missing from their lives. And like Stacy, John's brain shows heightened activity during REM sleep, suggesting that his subconscious is actively processing these emotions." As the crew continued their analysis, they began to see the same patterns emerge in John that they had seen in Stacy. His life, though outwardly logical and structured, was marked by an undercurrent of emotional complexity. His relationships were few, his social interactions minimal, yet his mind was constantly at work, analyzing, dissecting, searching for answers that eluded him. John, like Stacy, had begun to feel their presence. John stood in his apartment, the glow from his computer screen casting faint shadows across the room. He was reviewing data from his latest project, but his mind kept drifting, unable to focus. For days now, he had felt something. A presence, perhaps. A sensation that was always just out of reach, like someone watching him from afar. He shook his head, trying to brush the thought aside. It was ridiculous. No one was watching him. He was alone in his apartment, just as he always was. Yet the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. John rubbed his temples, his eyes narrowing as he stared out the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but even the familiar skyline couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over him. "I'm just overthinking," he told himself, but the rationalization felt hollow. The dreams had started a few weeks ago. They were vague at first, shadows, blurred figures, nothing concrete. But recently, they had grown more vivid. There was a figure in his dreams now, always distant, always just out of reach. He didn't know who it was, but there was an undeniable pull, a need to find them. He had dismissed the dreams at first. He was an analytical man, after all. Dreams were just the brain's way of processing information. But the more he dreamed, the more real it felt. And now, with this strange feeling of being watched, John was beginning to wonder if there was something more at play. Back aboard the Watcher, the crew watched John with growing fascination. "He's sensing us too," Lonni projected, her thoughts racing with excitement. "Just like Stacy." "It's remarkable," Eris added, his voice tinged with curiosity. "We've never encountered this kind of awareness before. Humans are not supposed to be able to detect our presence, yet both Stacy and John are sensing us in some way." "Could it be their heightened neural activity?" Mira suggested. "Both of them show anomalies in their brain patterns. Perhaps this sensitivity is what allows them to perceive us, even on a subconscious level." "It's possible," Lonni replied. "But it's more than just perception. They're feeling something deeper, a connection, perhaps, that goes beyond mere awareness." Kala's voice entered the conversation, filled with curiosity. "It's fascinating how both of them, despite their logical tendencies, are experiencing this on an emotional level. John, in particular, is struggling with the rationality of it all, but even he can't deny that something is happening." As they delved deeper into John's life, the crew uncovered more parallels between him and Stacy. Like Stacy, John had grown up in a family that valued logic and order, but he had always felt a quiet yearning for something more. His relationships had been fleeting, his focus always on his work, but there was a part of him that longed for connection, a part that he had kept buried beneath layers of rational thought. "His emotional responses are similar to Stacy's," Mira observed, her voice soft but focused. "He may not fully understand what's happening, but his subconscious is guiding him toward something. Toward her." Lonni nodded, her mind buzzing with possibilities. "We need to explore this further. There's a connection between them, something we haven't fully grasped yet. It's not just coincidence. There's a pattern here, something deeper that we need to understand." John's dreams had grown more intense in recent days. Each night the figure in his dreams became clearer, though always just out of reach. There was a sense of urgency now, a need to find them, to understand who they were and why they were so important. One night, as he lay in bed, the dream came again. He was standing in a vast, empty space, dark, endless, and quiet. The figure stood in the distance, their back turned to him, shrouded in shadow. John took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to reach them, needed to know who they were. But no matter how far he walked, the distance between them never closed. The figure remained just beyond his grasp, and the harder he tried to reach them, the further they seemed to drift away. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice echoing in the void. "Why can't I find you?" There was no answer, only the sound of his own breathing in the stillness. Back aboard the Watcher, Lonni and the crew watched John's dream unfold with rapt attention. "It's the same dream," Mira observed, her voice filled with awe. "The same figure, the same emotions. This can't be a coincidence." "It's not," Lonni agreed. "There's something connecting them, something deeper than we can explain." "We need to continue the analysis," Voron added, his mind focused. "This goes beyond what we initially expected." As they watched, John's dream faded, leaving only the quiet of his apartment in its wake. But the questions remained, unanswered, yet undeniable. John, like Stacy, was on the verge of something extraordinary. And the dwellers, for all their knowledge, were only just beginning to understand what it was. Chapter 14. First Results of Fate Analysis. Aboard the Watcher, the vast data streams blinked and shimmered as Lonni completed her latest calculations. Her mind, usually so clear and methodical, was now consumed by something far greater than logic alone. She had spent hours analyzing the impossible events connecting Stacy Sims and John Colt, and now, with the addition of their shared dream, the probability of these occurrences stood at an inconceivable number, 1 in 9.85 quintillion. Lonnie's telepathic voice reverberated through the chamber, the disbelief in her tone apparent. "This can't be right. And yet, the data is irrefutable." She leaned closer to the screen, her fingers brushing the crystalline interface. The calculation was final, and now Lonni had to make sense of it. She had known from the beginning that John and Stacy's connection was rare, an anomaly beyond anything the dwellers had encountered in their studies. But this number, 1 in 9.85 quintillion, was beyond extraordinary. It demanded explanation, context, something to help her crew grasp the sheer enormity of what they were witnessing. Lonni began her analysis, searching the universe for comparisons that might convey the magnitude of the odds. As she sifted through the data, she found a few examples that staggered even her. First, the number of grains of sand on Earth. Lonni pulled the figures from her database. The estimates suggested that there were approximately 7.5 quintillion grains of sand on all the beaches and deserts of Earth. She projected the image into her crew's minds. Vast stretches of coastline, deserts with dunes reaching into the horizon, all covered with countless grains of sand. "The probability of John and Stacy's connection is greater than even this. The odds we've calculated surpass the number of grains of sand on the planet." A soft murmur of disbelief echoed through the telepathic link connecting the crew. "And what about something closer to our study?" Lonni continued, her curiosity driving her forward. "Consider the human body." She accessed data on the human genome, biology, and cellular structures, pulling up the most relevant comparison. The average human body contains approximately 37 trillion cells. Think of that. Trillions of individual cells, each with its own function, forming the complex organism that is a human being. The probability of John and Stacy's connection is more than 266,000 times rarer than picking a single cell out of the entire human body. Mira, who had studied both John's and Stacy's genetic makeup, sent a wave of acknowledgement through the link, though even she couldn't deny the overwhelming magnitude of the comparison. But let's look even further, beyond Earth, beyond humans, into the galaxy itself. Lonni now turned to astronomical data, the distances and vastness of the Milky Way flashing before her mind's eye. The Milky Way galaxy is estimated to have 100 billion to 400 billion planets. These are staggering numbers by any standard, yet even the total number of planets in the galaxy is far smaller than 9.85 quintillion. The connection we've witnessed between John and Stacy defies even the totality of planets in the galaxy we're studying. Eris, always one to appreciate the scale of cosmic events, paused in thought. "It's as though fate itself is beyond even the reach of galaxies," he mused, his voice tinged with awe. But Lonni wasn't finished. "Finally, let's look at time itself, the history of the universe. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old, which equates to roughly 435 quadrillion seconds." She paused, letting the gravity of the comparison settle among the crew. Even with that many seconds in the history of the universe, the odds of John and Stacy's connection still exceed the entire number of seconds in the life of the cosmos. The chamber fell into a deep, contemplative silence. The dwellers, logical beings who had always relied on data and analysis, were now faced with a truth that defied even the most extreme probabilities. Lonnie's analysis had made one thing abundantly clear. The connection between John and Stacy was not simply an anomaly. It was beyond the realm of possibility. And yet, here it was, unfolding before them. Lonni stood from her station, her reflective eyes casting a faint glow in the dim light of the chamber. "We have the data," she projected, her voice steady, but laced with disbelief. "But how can we explain this? How can we understand how fate can beat these odds?" Eris, always calm and pragmatic, leaned back in his seat, his mind working through the problem. Fate, as humans understand it, doesn't follow the rules of logic or probability. They believe in something beyond data, something we've struggled to quantify. Kala, who had studied human cultures and philosophies, joined the conversation. Humans have been grappling with the concept of fate for centuries. They see it as a force beyond their control, something that shapes their lives in ways they can't predict. Even though we view it as an anomaly, to them, fate is part of their reality. Mira's thoughts were sharp and focused. But is it real? Or is it simply a construct they use to explain what they don't understand? Lonni considered this for a moment. It's possible that fate, as they perceive it, is a result of their need to make sense of the randomness in their lives. But the probability of John and Stacy's connection suggests something more, something beyond randomness. Voron, always the most data-driven among them, spoke next. "We need to approach this systematically. We have the probability. We have the data. But if we're going to understand how fate can beat these odds, we need to define what fate truly is." Lonni nodded. "Agreed. We need to break this down further. Look at every aspect of their connection. Their thoughts, their emotions, their dreams. Everything that has led them to this moment. We may not understand it fully yet, but the data is pointing us towards something profound." The crew exchanged a silent agreement, their minds buzzing with questions. Fate had always been a human concept, something that existed outside the realm of their studies. But now, faced with evidence that defied the very laws of probability, the dwellers were beginning to wonder if fate was something real, something they had never accounted for in their understanding of the universe. "We'll move forward with the analysis," Lonni said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll break down every element of this connection and see where it leads. If fate exists, we're going to find it." As the crew turned their attention back to their stations, Lonni couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. For the first time in her existence, she was faced with something that couldn't be explained by data alone. Chapter 15. Dweller's Fate. The Watcher hummed quietly as it orbited the Earth, the soft glow of its control panels casting long shadows in the dimly lit chamber. Lonni sat at her station, her mind still grappling with the staggering revelations from their recent analysis. The probability of John and Stacy's connection had been calculated to a number so vast, so impossible, that it had shaken her understanding of the universe. Yet, the crew had only just begun to comprehend the full magnitude of what they were witnessing. As Lonni sifted through the data streams, Voron approached her, his posture tense, his telepathic voice calm, yet filled with a strange urgency. "Lonni, there's something we missed," Voron projected, his thoughts focused. "Something crucial." Lonni turned to face him, her reflective eyes narrowing as she sensed the gravity of his words. "What do you mean?" Voron stepped closer, his presence steady but his mind buzzing with calculations. "We've been so focused on the improbability of John and Stacy's connection that we overlooked something important. We, us, the Dwellers, have been directly involved in this anomaly from the very beginning." Lonnie's mind sharpened, her attention fully on Voron now. "Explain." Voron moved to the data streams, pulling up new figures and calculations. "Think about it. From the moment you chose Stacy as your subject, we became part of this phenomenon. It wasn't just fate acting upon them. It was acting through us. The probability that you would have chosen Stacy, at the exact moment this anomaly started, is even more improbable than what we originally thought." Lonni felt a chill run through her as Voron continued. "I recalculated the probability, taking into account your choice of subject. The result is staggering. With a flick of his wrist, Voron projected the final calculation onto the main screen. The number loomed before them, vast and incomprehensible. 1 in 7.88 octillion. The chamber fell silent as Lonni stared at the number. She had thought the previous calculation, 1 in 9.85 quintillion, was impossible. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. 1 in 7.88 octillion? Lonni echoed, her voice filled with disbelief. That's unimaginable. Voron nodded, his expression grim but resolute. To put it in perspective, this probability is greater than some of the most fundamental quantities in the universe. Let me show you. He projected a series of comparisons, each one more staggering than the last. Number of atoms in a human body. The average human body contains approximately 7 octillion atoms, 7 times 10 to the 27th. Think of that. Each cell, each molecule, every single atom working together to form a living being. And yet, the probability of Lonni choosing Stacy in this rare anomaly exceeds the number of atoms in a human body. Lonni stared at the comparison, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of it. Number of water molecules in Earth's oceans. The oceans of Earth contain approximately 4.5 octillion water molecules, 4.5 times 10 to the 27th. Vast, endless stretches of water, teeming with life, swirling in currents that have shaped the planet for millennia. And still, the probability of this anomaly surpasses even that. Eris, who had been listening quietly, let out a low hum of amazement. We're talking about scales beyond anything we've ever encountered. Number of stars in the observable universe. Voron continued, pulling up the next comparison. There are approximately 1 to 2 sextillion stars, 1 to 2 times 10 to the 21st power, in the observable universe. The vast, shimmering expanse of the cosmos, filled with galaxies and solar systems, each star burning for eons. Yet even this number pales in comparison to the probability we're witnessing. Kala, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice tinged with awe. This anomaly is more than just rare. It's beyond the scale of the universe itself. Lonni sat back, her mind racing as she processed the new information. The numbers were beyond anything she had ever encountered in her long career as a dweller. She had always relied on data, on logic, on the quantifiable nature of the universe. But now, faced with this impossibility, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. So, what are you saying? Lonni asked, her voice quiet but filled with a growing realization. Voron looked at her, his expression solemn. What I'm saying is that we've been part of this from the beginning. Fate didn't just act upon John and Stacy. It acted through us. You chose Stacy as your subject at the precise moment this anomaly began to unfold. We became part of the equation. Lonnie's thoughts raced. You're saying we're not just observers, we're participants. Exactly, Voron replied. We've been influencing this from the start, whether we realized it or not. Fate has been guiding us just as much as it's been guiding them. The weight of his words settled over the crew like a heavy fog. They had spent their lives studying the universe, cataloging every detail with meticulous precision. But now, they were confronted with the possibility that they were not merely detached observers. They were part of something much larger, something they had never considered. This changes everything, Lonni whispered, her voice filled with awe. Mira, who had been studying John and Stacy's emotional and psychological states, stepped forward, her voice soft but thoughtful. If we're part of this, then it means fate is not just an external force. It's woven into everything, into us, into the universe itself. Eris, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. But what does that mean for our study? How do we proceed if we're part of the anomaly? Voron's voice was steady, but filled with uncertainty. We continue the study, but we do so with the understanding that we're not just collecting data. We're part of the very fabric of this phenomenon. Lonni stood from her station, pacing slowly as she considered their next steps. The enormity of what they had uncovered was almost too much to process, but she knew they couldn't stop now. They had to continue, to see where this path led them, no matter how far beyond logic and probability it might go. We'll move forward, Lonni said, her voice filled with quiet determination. We'll continue the analysis, but we do so with the understanding that fate has been guiding us all along. The crew exchanged glances, their minds buzzing with questions and uncertainties. But there was one thing they all knew for certain. They were no longer merely observers. They were part of the phenomenon they were studying, and fate, whatever it was, had been guiding them from the very beginning. As the Watcher drifted silently above the earth, Lonni felt a sense of awe wash over her. For the first time in her existence, she realized that some forces in the universe could not be explained by data alone, and fate, it seemed, was one of them.